When a member of the president's own party stands up and says publicly on the record without hesitation that the commander-in-chief does not have the unilateral authority to send American men and women into combat on Iranian soil, something fundamental has shifted, not in the opposition, inside the party itself. Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace of South Carolina delivered a statement this week that has quietly detonated inside the halls of the United States Capitol and inside the West Wing. Her message was direct, constitutional, and politically explosive. Congress should have a say on whether President Trump deploys U.S. service members into Iran, not a courtesy notification after the fact, not a classified briefing designed to give lawmakers the appearance of consultation without the substance of it, an actual, formal, constitutional voice, the kind the War Powers Resolution was specifically designed to guarantee, and the kind that multiple administrations across both parties have spent decades systematically eroding. Mace is not a liberal Democrat. She is not a member of the anti-war left. She is a Republican representing a deeply conservative South Carolina district, operating in a party that has largely rallied behind Trump's Iran policy with remarkable discipline over the past 4 weeks, which is precisely why what she said matters so much. Because when loyalty starts to fracture inside the governing coalition, when members of the president's own party begin reaching for constitutional arguments to constrain his war-making authority, it does not happen in isolation. It is a signal, a leading indicator of a broader breakdown in the political consensus that any president needs to sustain a military conflict over time, and the timing could not be more consequential. The United States is now 4 weeks into an active military confrontation with Iran. Strikes have been conducted. Iranian retaliatory attacks have occurred. American service members are in harm's way throughout the Persian Gulf region. The question of whether ground troops will be ordered into Iranian territory, a question the administration has refused to definitively answer, is no longer hypothetical. It is the central operational and political fault line of this entire conflict. Mace has just planted a constitutional flag directly on that fault line. Her statement invokes one of the most contested and consequential questions in American constitutional law, the war powers question. Who has the authority to send Americans to war? The Constitution grants Congress the power to declare war. It makes the president the commander-in-chief. For nearly a century, those two provisions have been in productive tension, and for the past 5 decades, since the passage of the War Powers Resolution in 1973, the battle over where presidential authority ends and congressional authority begins has never been fully, finally resolved. Until that question is resolved, or until enough Republican lawmakers join Mace in demanding an answer, the White House faces a political threat that no missile defense system can intercept. Subscribe to this channel right now. Turn on notifications, because the fracture opening inside the Republican Party over Iran is moving fast. And its consequences for the war, for American democracy, and for the men and women in uniform waiting for their orders are enormous. The warning has been issued. The question now is whether Washington is listening. To understand why Nancy Mace's statement carries the constitutional weight that it does, you have to understand a conflict that has been running parallel to every American war since 1973, the unresolved, perpetually contested, never fully settled battle between the White House and Capitol Hill over who actually controls the decision to go to war. It begins, as so much of American constitutional law does, with a document and a disagreement. The Constitution is deliberately divided on the question of war. Article 1, Section 8 grants Congress and Congress alone the power to declare war. Article 2 makes the president the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. The founders designed this tension intentionally. They had lived under a king who could wage war on personal authority alone, and they wanted no American president to hold that same unchecked power. But they also understood that a republic needs the capacity for swift military action, that a commander-in-chief paralyzed by legislative process in a moment of genuine emergency is a commander-in-chief who cannot defend the nation. For the first century and a half of American history, that tension was managed through practice and precedent rather than formal law. Presidents sent troops. Congress appropriated funds. Declarations of war were issued for major conflicts: the War of 1812, the Mexican-American War, the Spanish-American War, both world wars. The system was imperfect but functional. Then came Korea, then Vietnam. Neither war was ever formally declared by Congress. Both consumed tens of thousands of American lives. And by the time the Vietnam War had torn the country apart politically and morally, Congress had had enough. In 1973, over President Nixon's veto, lawmakers passed the War Powers Resolutional Landmark piece of legislation. That attempted for the first time to formally codify the boundary between executive and legislative war-making authority. The resolution requires the president to notify Congress within 48 hours of committing U.S. forces to armed conflict. It limits unauthorized military engagements to 60 days without congressional approval, and it grants Congress the power to compel withdrawal of forces through a concurrent resolution that does not require the president's signature. Every president since Nixon, Democrat and Republican alike, has complied with its notification requirements while simultaneously declaring the resolution itself unconstitutional. It is one of Washington's most enduring contradictions, a law that presidents follow and reject at the same time. The Trump administration's approach to the Iran conflict has followed this exact pattern. Notifications were submitted, briefings were conducted, the 60-day clock by most legal analyses is now running, but the administration has made no move towards seeking formal congressional authorization and has shown every indication that it does not intend to. That is the legal and historical landscape into which Nancy Mace just stepped. Her intervention is not without precedent within Republican ranks. During the first Gulf War, a significant number of congressional Republicans joined Democrats in demanding a formal authorization vote before George H. Bush committed ground forces to Kuwait, a vote that ultimately passed and gave the operation broad political legitimacy. During the Iraq War's early years, Republican Senator Chuck Hagel became one of the first members of the party to publicly question the administration's war-making authority. In both cases, the initial dissenters were dismissed as outliers. In both cases, they turned out to be the leading edge of something much larger. The question that every political analyst in Washington is now asking in the wake of Mace's statement is the same question that always follows the first Republican break from a Republican president on a question of war and peace. Is she alone? Or is she the first? History suggests that answer matters more than almost anything else happening in this conflict right now. Here is exactly what happened, what was said, where it was said, and why the precise language Congresswoman Mace chose matters as much as the statement itself. The declaration did not come from a formal press conference staged for maximum visibility. It did not arrive as a carefully coordinated opposition broadside choreographed by House Democratic leadership. It came organically in response to a direct question about the Iran war's trajectory from a Republican Congresswoman who has, until this point, largely operated within the boundaries of her party's pro-Trump consensus. That context is not incidental. It is essential. Mace was not performing for a liberal audience. She was speaking to a constituency and to a party that she knows intimately. Her core statement was this: Congress should have a say on whether Trump deploys U.S. service members into Iran. 7 words that carry 2 centuries of constitutional weight. The word should is doing significant legal and political work in that sentence. It is not the language of someone filing an emergency injunction or introducing a formal war powers resolution challenge on the House floor, at least not yet. It is the language of someone drawing a line in public, staking out a position, and signaling to the administration and to her colleagues that she is watching, that she is prepared to escalate her challenge if the answer is unsatisfactory, and that she believes the constitutional argument is on her side. The White House's response was measured in tone but pointed in substance. Administration officials, speaking without attribution, characterized Mace's statement as a misreading of the president's commander-in-chief authority. They argued that existing congressional authorizations, specifically the 2001 authorization for use of military force passed in the immediate aftermath of the September 11th attacks, and the 2002 OMF authorizing force in Iraq provide sufficient legal cover for the administration's Iran operations. They further argued that the president's inherent Article 2 authority to protect American forces and interests abroad does not require additional legislative permission. That argument is not frivolous. It is the same argument that the Obama administration used to justify drone strikes across multiple countries. It is the same argument the first Trump administration used to justify the killing of Qasem Soleimani. The legal architecture of post-9/11 executive war-making authority is real. It is established, and it has survived repeated congressional and judicial challenges. But here is where Mace's position introduces a genuinely new and more difficult complication. The 2001 and 2002 OMFs were written to authorize force against specific actors, al-Qaeda, its affiliates, and the government of Saddam Hussein's Iraq. Applying those authorizations to a direct, large-scale military confrontation with the sovereign state of Iran requires a legal stretch that a growing number of constitutional scholars, including several prominent conservatives, describe as unsustainable. Iran is not al-Qaeda. The IRG, while designated a terrorist organization, is a branch of a sovereign government, and the conflict currently unfolding in the Persian Gulf is not a counterterrorism operation. It is a state-on-state military confrontation of a scale and character that the 2001 OMFs authors never envisioned and almost certainly never intended to authorize. Mace knows this argument. She is making it deliberately. The competing narratives, therefore, sit in sharp relief. The administration insists it has all the legal authority it needs and that seeking additional congressional authorization would dangerously slow the military's operational tempo. Mace and the constitutional challengers insist that no president, regardless of party, has the unilateral authority to commit American ground forces to combat inside a sovereign nation without Congress being formally consulted and formally heard. Between those two positions lies the question that may ultimately determine not just the legal fate of this conflict, but its political survival, because wars that lose congressional support do not end quickly, they end badly.